Being a massive Godzilla fan, I was extremely cautiously optimistic for Godzilla Singular Point. While on one hand I didn't want to get burned like I did with the Godzilla anime trilogy, on the other hand I was recently spoiled with the quality of Pacific Rim the Black, and only a few days before Singular Point came out I actually bothered to watch the Castlevania series, meaning at the time Netflix's original anime productions were batting good averages to me. So in the end, how good was Godzilla Singular Point? Well, overall, to avoid spoilers, I'd say it was a solid series overall, but not one devoid of problems. While on one hand it did have some cool moments and was very smart in the dumbest way possible, it was also really fucking boring for the first 5 episodes. I'd say if you want to go and spoil it from, my recommendation would be that if you don't find yourself interested for the first chunk, it's definitely worth the wait to just get to the good stuff. But if you don't want to be that one guy who goes to a restaurant that shits on your place for the first 5 dishes before finally giving you that goddamn medium rare steak with pepper sauce, maybe just don't watch the show. And it's not like you can go, oh, I'll just skip the first 5 episodes, how much could they really add? Because Godzilla Singular Point goes full dimensional tearing on your ass. Any of my Versus fans would get what that means, but anybody who doesn't, Godzilla Singular Point plays a lot with the concepts involving sort of minor time travel and higher dimensional existence. The idea of existence on the 4th dimension, allowing for the sending of implicit information across different points of time, and what I mean by that is essentially the show puts in a bunch of smart sounding words together and makes something barely coherent. I like this video. And those 5 episodes, boring as they were to me, certainly lay down the foundational groundwork for a really good second half, and given the show is 13 episodes, that means the amount I enjoyed compared to the amount I didn't was almost double. And yes, I know one of the most common defenses to criticism over a Godzilla related piece of media having too much human stuff is, most Godzilla films are already 90% humans and 10% Godzilla, but this notion simply isn't true. While there are certainly some films that manage this sort of really poor balance, most notably the 2014 Godzilla film, most Godzilla films have a higher percentage of Godzilla than that, and are able to mask it by having Godzilla appear sporadically throughout, often the main appearance at the start and middle of a story, with a big finale and conclusion later. And often I found myself not even noticing due to the inclusion of other non-Godzilla kaiju, and also generally enjoying the human characters. For instance, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, Godzilla More the King Ghidorah Giant Monsters Light Attack, and most of the Heisei era don't really bother me much with the abundance of time spent with humans, because generally I quite enjoyed those moments. And Final Wars even broke interesting ground by having the humans being as much part of the spectacle as the kaiju, and having Don fucking Fry.
You'd hit a woman.
Yeah.
What a boss. As of a Singular Point, I think my issue is that I really don't care about any of these humans like I did Akana Yashiro, Ishiro Serizawa, or Miki Sayagusa. Now, I don't dislike any of them, but I just generally don't care for them, all except for one, a conspicuously purple-haired girl in this kaiju and robot story named Mei. Okay, let's get the comparison out of the way. No, Mei Kamino is not as fucking spectacular as Pacific Rim the Black Mei, but she's still a good character. Wow, Nemesis, you like the purple-haired anime female. I wonder if you've got a type. Ahaha, you're half right, yes I do have a type. But it's actually redheads. Though admittedly purple hair is also pretty based, I should know, look at that shit's goated. Aside from Mei, who had the overall most interesting scenes and best writing and characterization, there's also Yu Narakawa, a Sakata Gentoki looking motherfucker who's about the second most interesting character for being the only other one who gets anything done. Well, that's not true, plenty of them get stuff done, but he was really the only one that I had any investment in. Aside from that, there was Mr. O, who was completely nuts and at least he stood out though, and Pelops II, Pelops 2, Pelops Boogaloo, who was an AI who was one of the most integral characters in the entire series and literally only exists because Mei found a free download link online and clicked on it, got on her computer and just let it stay around where it became a fully sentient entity. This mother has built sentient AI and the best he does is drop it for free to download on the internet. Anyway, yes, while I like the small handful of characters, a lot of the first episodes amount to build up, set up, and with the occasional break being made for a brief glancing at Godzilla's first form, Anguirus, who true to form got his shit rocked and then a chunk of him turned into a weapon for Jaguar, and Rodan, who is now a complete flock of pterosaurs, meaning you can finally argue that Rodan vs. Gauss is thematic. Ever notice how Rodan has gotten progressively weaker as time has gone on? First Godzilla appearance, he was Godzilla's equal, then he was able to keep up but was taken out by bigger shots, then he got defeated in one hit, then he shows up and loses to Mothra, and now he's a flock of easily dispatched pterosaurs of which one struggles against a junk heap that was built in a garage. Anyway, yeah, so you might have noticed I said Godzilla's first form. That's because Godzilla in this series sort of redoes the whole Shin Godzilla thing, you know, a aquatic creature that comes out to land slowly evolves into being the full-on Godzilla, even having a similarly more antagonistic and demonic design to it with a stupid looking tail. Fortunately, I wasn't too bothered by the tail in motion because Godzilla was always surrounded in this red misty haze, which thankfully didn't obscure him too badly. On that note, the animation here is solid and good, none of that choppy shit the anime trilogy tried to do, smooth ass 3D animation mixed with traditional hand-drawn 2D in a way that looks good to me. But yeah, you might notice in the series that Godzilla himself doesn't do much. Essentially, he swims a bit, gets into a scuffle, explodes, evolves, and just sits in the middle of the city shooting random shit, and like, yeah, it's cool, but it also makes Godzilla feel a lot less like a primary threat and more of a static object that sometimes does bad shit and blows things up. Really, Godzilla could just be replaced with a monolith that has a railgun on it that sometimes shoot things, and the story really wouldn't change. Compared to other kaiju like Rodan, Kumonga, and its subsidiaries, Kamanga, Zenbunga, and Hanenga, who all play a more major role when it comes to the obstacles faced by our protagonists, he really doesn't do much. In fact, the only kaiju to fight Godzilla properly are Jet Jaguar right near the end, and some Manders who die really fucking easily. And yeah, Jet Jaguar is our primary protagonist kaiju, and as someone who was never a too big a fan of the Showa era guy, I can safely say I don't mind this version at all. It's perfectly serviceable, and I kinda like the scrappy home-built design for it. And hallelujah, they finally introduced a new proper-sized main kaiju in the Reiwa era. After the anime trilogy only gave us the fucking Servum, and Shin Godzilla gave us nothing, we've now got Solunga, who's just a fusion of Gabara and Baragon, likely not given the name Gabara due to the negative connotation that name holds him in the community. Well, it could be worse, okay? Now, as for the story's quality, I think once things start getting going, we actually start delving into things about dimensions and timelines, it becomes both convoluted and nonsensical, but also much more entertaining. Even when there were no characters I particularly gave a shit about on screen, I was always engaged because a lot of the focus was on the mysteries and setup revolving around the concept of sending information into the future without sending actual information. The basic concept of sending someone the answer to a question without any context. For instance, imagine if I just said to you randomly one day, it's the banana, and then 3 hours later when you've gotten food poisoning and are looking at what you've eaten today that gave you the food poisoning, you realize that what I was referring to was the banana you ate having gone off without your knowledge. Though the information they send in this series is a lot more useful than just, in hindsight it was the banana. It's an interesting concept and it got me wondering a lot about how it could be used and about what previously in the series was set up for a later payoff. And hey, in the end, one of the very first shots of the entire series ends up playing a major role in the characters figuring out the mystery, and it all ties up nice and well. I really like this concept, and while it was a bit confusing and hard to wrap my head around at points, I got the gist of it and made for a very entertaining storyline to follow. Also, Mechagodzilla set up for later. So what do I think about the series overall? Once again, just like the Black, there's surprisingly little of what you'd expect, that being Godzilla fighting kaiju. And while there's a lot of Jaguar fighting kaiju, it really isn't anything like traditional kaiju fights, and there's a lot more general tokusatsu like Kamen Rider or Power Rangers. And in that regard, I recognize it can be a bit of a letdown. Sure, Godzilla gets to do a lot of cool shit, but only a few times is that against other kaiju, and every time he does fight a kaiju, he blows it away in a single shot. And I can nearly see how some people would not really be a fan of that. Me personally, I enjoyed it past the initial hurdle. Once all the bases were set up and we got the build up and shit out of the way, the story becomes a lot faster, the narrative a lot more in-depth and interesting, the concepts more meaningful, and the kaiju stuff a lot more prevalent and entertaining. Overall, it's a good series and a massive step up from the anime trilogy, and I eagerly anticipate any future seasons that may or may not happen. Anyway, yeah, so while I like the small handful of characters, a lot of the first episodes amounts to build up, set up, and